Hey guys, welcome to another video, and today's video is about Procreate. So this is a program that I've been using for the past 3 years or so, and it's definitely become my favorite program to create my digital drawings on. Today's video is going to be a little bit of a walkthrough. I'm basically going to show you how I go about creating my illustrations. And you know, there is no right or wrong way to do things with Procreate, but there's definitely hard ways and easy ways. So hopefully I can show you some easier ways of doing things, although I will say I do find myself doing things the hard way sometimes, and I think to myself, why am I doing it like this? I know there's an easier way. Anyway, I'm going to show you some of my favorite brushes and stuff like that, and as well, I'll put a link in the description to where you can download Procreate if you haven't already. And so we're going to start with our sketch. I would say 50% of the time I'm sketching on paper, and then 50% of the time I'm sketching on my iPad. If I am sketching in my sketchbook, I'm then taking a photo on my iPad and putting that into Procreate to sketch over the top. When I am doing sketches in my book, I'm keeping them pretty basic, and most of the time they're just kind of like thumbnail size sketches. They're mainly just a guide, like for example this skull, which you can hardly even tell what it is here. Once I put it into Procreate, this is what it turned into. As well as the devil girl on the right, for example, she started as a little sketch in my book. Once I put it into Procreate, I put her onto a layer underneath and put her opacity all the way down, just so I can kind of see her as a guide so I can draw over the top. And then I can kind of like re-sketch her and fix things up. Once I outlined her, I did kind of fix up her hand to sit on her chest a little bit better, and I kind of just refined the sketch a little bit more. And then you can see through adding my layers and adding my shading in, I was able to come up with a nice finished illustration. So let's open our file. We're going to start with an A4 file. This is my go-to because sometimes I make prints out of my illustrations, but it's also just a habit to go A4. Honestly, it really just depends on the project I'm doing as well and the quality that I need. And also today I'm going to be doing everything on the iPad, including the sketching, because I want to show you what brushes I like to use for sketching. I like using both red and blue as colors for my sketch. I think they're both really good contrasting colors that can really help to build and refine your sketch. You'll see what I mean. When it comes to the brushes that I like to use, we have Peppermint, HB Pencil, Norinda, and Dry Ink. These are my main go-tos when it comes to my sketch. These all come with Procreate. You don't need to download them separately. So for today's drawing, I'm going to do something that's pretty typical for me, which is one of my girl characters. But it's really easy for me to draw, and I love drawing them. Notice here I'm flipping her face back and forth. This is a really good piece of advice for when you're drawing faces. Doing this kind of gives you a different perspective on the face, and it makes you realize some parts are out of proportion. So it really helps you to kind of make sure everything's in place. This is one reason why I really like drawing digitally too, because it is very easy to check that. Although sometimes I will do a drawing and I'll flip it and it seems to be perfect, but that doesn't happen very often. So having this little technique to use is actually really, really good. So this is my second layer of the sketch. So my first layer where I've got the red, I'm now putting down the opacity and I'm choosing to sketch over the top of that with blue. And I'm going to be using the Dry Ink brush because it's a little bit similar to the pen I'll be using for outlining. And this is the layer where I want to really refine my whole sketch and get it pretty close to how I want to outline it. I used to be very rushed and not spend very much time on my sketch because I'm a bit of an impatient person and I just want to get into the drawing. But ever since tattooing, I've started to really slow down and have a bit more patience, and I'm now putting way more time into my sketch, and I'm finding it's definitely helping me create better drawings. So I will spend a bit of time on my sketch making sure it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good guide for me to go from. There we go, there is the sketch finished. It went from this to this. Now I don't really need the red one anymore, so I'm just gonna hide that layer, and I'm gonna turn the opacity of the blue layer down so I can use it as a reference for when I'm doing my outline. Now when it comes to outlining, I have one favorite pen. Just one. It is the Studio Pen, because in my opinion it is the cleanest pen in the whole of Procreate, although sometimes when I'm wanting to do something rougher, I do use the dry ink pen as well sometimes. If you click on the actual brush, it's going to take you to another page. This is where you can modify some things to do with the brush. I personally don't really play with anything except for the streamline. I do find it a little bit hard to draw neatly on the iPad, so this kind of helps to neaten up your lines a bit. So I'll show you an example. If I put it on 0 and do a little bit of a squiggle, wrong layer, you know, it's okay, but it could be a lot neater. There are a couple of kinks and stuff in there. I'm going to put it up to 76%. I never put it on 100%. I usually put it around, 75. You can kind of see now that it has neatened up the line a little bit. So I'm going to keep it probably on 76% for my outline, but I do change it quite a bit as I go. It's just a really good little tip to know. You can actually use this on any brush, and you can kind of just modify it to how you want to use it. Another reason why the Studio Pen probably is my favorite brush is because it does go thick to thin. So you can very easily go from thin to thick lines throughout your piece without having to play around with the sizing bar on the left. And I just find that really convenient, and the less steps I have to take, the better for me. So I'm just slowing this down for a second to show you a quick little tip as I go. So if you draw in a shape and all of the ends are joined, you can get your color up in the right hand side and literally just drag and drop it, and it's going to fill in that shape. So the earring I'm drawing right now, I'm actually doing on 3 different layers. So I've got the big ring, the smaller ring, and the heart. I do this because it means that I can move things around and erase bits that I need without ruining the other layers. So once I'm happy with these, I'm going to consolidate them all. So you can either do this by tapping on each layer you want, and it's going to come up with an option and it's going to say merge down. So you can manually say merge down for all of them. Or you can put your finger on the top layer and the bottom layer and pinch them together, and they're all going to consolidate. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that layer of the earring by swiping to the left, pushing duplicate, and then I'm going to use that earring on the other side of her head. It makes it a lot easier, and it means I don't have to redraw it. So now that we've finished our outline, we're going to make a new layer and put that underneath the outline layer, and that's going to be where we do all of our main fill color. So in this part, I'm showing you how to use your outline as a reference, and I'm just going to pause here. I actually did this part wrong. I actually duplicated my outline layer and then made the duplicate a reference. You don't actually have to do this. All you have to do is reference the first outline layer, then every layer underneath that is going to be referenced off your outline, and then if you don't want it referencing anymore, all you have to do is go back and turn the reference off. But basically what referencing does is allows you to kind of just drag and drop your color as if it's a coloring book. I don't use it very often. So as you can see here, using it on hair is just too time consuming for me. And I personally like to have the hair just one block color so I can change it really easily if I want to. But I will, however, use it for the skin tones because it does make it a little bit easier in this sense. It's just a little shortcut that you can use if you want to, but if I have to be totally honest, I don't really use it that often. So what I do to color the rest of her is I'm still using my studio pen, but I've got the streamline on about 20 or 30%, and I'll just enlarge the brush and kind of do it that way. This is another thing that I was saying, that sometimes I do things the hard way, but I think it's okay to not have to rush everything, and this way still works. So now we are getting onto the shading, and I'm choosing a color to start with a couple skin tones darker than the tone that I gave her. And this shading layer is a separate layer to the other color layer we just did. So it's going to be sitting above that main fill color layer. I'm still using the studio pen. I told you I love the studio pen, but I've probably put the streamline up a little bit because I still want my shading to be pretty crispy. When it comes to my shading, I'm pretty much just doing it the way that I like to do it, but you know, you can do it however you like. This is just how I personally like to do it. So when it comes to the colors that I use, I always use minimum 4 shades of the one color. So for example, here we've got my base skin tone, a deeper skin tone, a second deeper skin tone, which is what I'm using right now on the eyes, and then I go in with a lighter of the base skin tone as my highlights. I do the same thing on the hair. Usually if I'm doing a little bit more of a detailed piece, I might have more shades, but I generally keep it about 4 shades. Okay, so here I'm going to add like a little bit of a pink flush to her cheeks. So I'm going to choose my color, and then the brush that I'm going to use is kind of like a textured brush that I really like, but I did download, so it's not available on Procreate, but you can also go with like one of the airbrush options and put the opacity down. So I'm going to get my brush, put it up, put the opacity down a little bit, and just really lightly kind of brush over her cheeks. And don't forget that I'm doing this on a separate layer. So I'm going to go in and erase all of the parts that I don't want. So I'm putting down the opacity of the layer with the cheeks, and I've made another layer to put a little bit of red on the end of her nose. The reason I did these two on separate layers is because I want to be able to erase the blush on the nose without affecting the cheeks. And then I'm going to bring those layers together, and then once I'm happy with them, I'm going to bring them into the color layer. I personally prefer to work with less layers, but I don't think that my habit is a very good habit to have. When I used to mainly use Adobe Illustrator, I would have a separate layer for every single bit I was doing, and I do think it's actually a really good way to work, because there has been times in the past when I've been annoyed at myself for making all my layers too simple, but hey, it's totally up to you, it's personal preference. So I found her shirt was a little bit boring, so I wanted to change it up a bit, and what I did is I made a layer above the colored layer and colored it in her skin tone. I've then put the opacity down, which makes it look like her shirt is see-through, to kind of just spice things up a little bit. And well, you know me, I always like to have some boobs in there somewhere. I'm going to show you something called Alpha Lock. So we're going to go ahead and draw a circle. If you draw a circle and hold down, it actually gives you the option to draw a perfect circle. Now I'm dragging and dropping my color, going to the layer where I've got the circle and pushing Alpha Lock. Alpha Lock means that you can now color your shape without going out on the outside. So it kind of keeps everything in that one shape. I'm showing you this because I'm actually going to use it on the hair layer, which means I can shade it without having to worry about overlapping and going onto the face and having to erase anything. we're going to do our background. I've already drag and dropped a blue color to a layer underneath everything else. I'm going to show you how to do a fade background. So we're going to choose a secondary color, and of course I'm going with pink. Go to the select, click rectangle. We're going to select that bottom half of the canvas and drag and drop our second color. We're then going to go to adjustments, go to Gaussian blur. Yes, I did have to Google how to say that word. And then moving our stylus left to right, it controls how much blur we want it to have. And you can do this with multiple colors, not just 2. You can have like 4 different colors layered, 5 different colors layered, but it's a really fun kind of trick to know, and I actually use it pretty often. Adding a couple of white clouds into the background and putting a white outline around her. I really like to do this to kind of like make her pop a bit. Here is the finished drawing. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you made it all the way to the end, I really enjoyed making this video. I hope I wasn't too rushed in explaining what I was trying to explain and you kind of got the hang of it. And I'll see you in the next video.